welcome to Culture Days Canada 2020. My name is Dave Rogers, and it is a pleasure and honor today to have a dear friend from Montreal who is today enjoying a wonderful opportunity to really connect to nature. His name is Boris Verkhovsky. He has been an incredible leader in the arena of edutainment, sport, activities of the mind, and making incredible things occur. Before we kick off with the session, I would like to make a little acknowledgement of the land, that we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. It is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon, One Point Agreement. I've really enjoyed that part of events here in Canada, acknowledging the land, and it's been something that is new to me. When I came back to Canada, I've noticed that it really is prevalent everywhere in Canada. Welcome, Boris. How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to be part of it. I also have a tremendously deep respect to the Indigenous values and Indigenous presence, and a reminder to all of us that this is where we are. I don't know if I would use the word guest, but I would always have that notion of reminding myself the presence in somebody else's place.
And so both of us, again, it's been fascinating coming back to Canada and seeing that there is an honoring. And I believe that your way of engaging with the land and people has been very influenced by your life. And today I wanted to really chat with you about questions and the importance of questions and the way that questions have been such an influence in your life, and whether that's been a number of questions that are constantly asked in your life that you ask yourself. And I guess the way I phrased it was, let's get to know Boris's top 5 questions that he tends to ask himself. So would you have a couple of questions that you might be able to elucidate for people in honoring culture, yet also creativity and the things that you do in your life?
I think we can probably say that there is a question that we can structure out of anything and out of everything. And more than that, as you were saying, we have to pose the questions, even regardless, whether it's in education, whether it's in communication, whether it's in business. There is this notion of why. That's one of the elements that is becoming so essential in the way we do, whether it's a design thing, in the notion of posing, or being able to structure and pose correct way the question why. It is not the fact that you will get a clear and easy answer. It's the fact that it forces you to reflect. And in this process of reflecting, we're developing basically a capability in our brain for a complex thinking, number one, and number two, for a critical development of the structure of the complex evolution and the complex development of structures. So from that standpoint, posing question is absolutely most essential, and life poses questions on its own, no matter whether we like it or not.
When you ask the why question, there's some people that go to a why and then why am I always this, or why am I always losing? Whereas when you ask the why question, do you tend to look up and actually, what's your physiology when you're dealing with the why question?
This is very interesting. I have a very interesting relationship with a lady, Dr. Fiona Kerr, in Adelaide, Australia, who has been with university for years, but she's done about 25 years worth of consulting in heavy industries, military, the major players in this world, and then decided to go back to academics and did her PhD in neurosciences. And one of the things, and the reason I'm thinking of her, is that she wrote the book the art of looking up. And that notion of the physical looking up, there is something unique that happens, and this is something that we still need to learn. And you alluded to Oriental culture and Oriental experiences where there's so much of accumulated knowledge and experience of relationship between the physical being and the other forms of our being. And so that physical notion of looking up, something happens when we do that. And also there's some things that you learn in whether you're interested in Qigong or Tai Chi or any other forms of Eastern forms of exercise, exercising energy or exercising physicality, whatever that may be. But today, the neuroscientists are discovering unique things that when you do certain movements that are relatively simple and they're very repetitive, the more you do them, the more activities in the brain are changing and more centers firing up and on and on. And so you look at animals doing this. When you look at animals doing the licking of the arm by the cat and it's repetitive, it has nothing to do with cleansing. There is something else in this connection between the physical movement and what does it do to our brain and how it feeds back, and that feedback loop between the physicality and something else is very peculiar. And so I'm curious, why did you ask the question of what is the physicality and the response of the physical being when you're posing the question why? What is it that you see in that?
There is definitely a movement, and in my studies and also in the book that was written, Get 2020 Vision, Mental Wellness Edition, that why can be the water, and that's the element that the Chinese like to use. The what, and you asked it, what do you do? So the what question is actually really easy for people to answer, and it's a would question where you can have growth. What are 3 things that you can do for your wellness? Very easy to answer, because it allows somebody to go to their own position, and then you get to understand their model of the world. And so the what question is part of the constructive cycle of the I Ching, which goes from why are we doing this? What would you like to do? What would be fun for you? And then the next question is the fire question, is who would you like to play with? Who would you like to engage? And that sequence of questions, almost anybody can answer with simplicity, or as one of my teachers likes to teach me, with effortless ease. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people, in the way that even education has been designed, they jump to how. And the how question gets prioritized. And in many ways, in fact, in my little research, 7 out of 8 people find answering a how question demoralizing, difficult, destructive, particularly for self-confidence, self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And that's how. That is the metal energy of the I Ching. And so it's not wrong. It's just, if you want to slow down time, keep asking how. Get stuck in the minutia. And there's some people that do that really well. Yet it can be incredibly demoralizing for a 7-year-old. And the 7-year-old, someone's sort of sitting there crossed arms. So how are you going to fix that? And all of a sudden, there is no confidence. There's no self-esteem. And that's one of the things that I would love to be part of, a movement to potentially shift the way that we ask questions. Mm-hmm. That we can ask a question that anybody can answer, and then they can go and experiment, and they can find a way that suits them. And I have a feeling you've been doing that. Like, my inner feeling is that that's what you do. You get people into a resourceful state where they feel they can go and experiment, and the fear of failures, it's reduced. That's actually the progress that comes into play, as opposed to the putting people up so that they can be chopped down. So I was curious on the way you ask questions. That's really what was my interest today, was to ask Boris what questions he asks himself.
I think you're touching on something that's very essential to this notion of communication, partnership, relationship, and obviously educating and helping somebody to grow. The art of asking questions is definitely something that we are not great with, and we're not teaching it very well. When the questions are rather direct and simplistic, well, then we're expecting too much in return. So I think that whole notion of and being brought up in the academic world and having to work in academia for years, we speak of art of posing questions, but even there we're a bit too much in a narrow spectrum of it, where we're thinking of a pure academic way of designing questionnaires and designing exams and designing things, where what you and I are talking about is a different notion of question. It's a question that you're helping to bring somebody to a point of reflection, and you have to do it in such a way that they feel comfortable to reflect. And reflect does not mean making a declaration. Declaration is a result of a very in-depth preparation, analysis, structuring the answer. That is not necessarily what we're looking for. I think what we're looking for is to create a comfort zone where the person can think out loud. And I think that is probably what you're referring to by and large, where if we're develop the skills where we help somebody to be in that space and respond in that way to the questions, and specifically why. If the person doesn't feel being put on the spot when they ask, why did you do that? Perhaps it's in the tone of voice. We know that in communication, and specifically in English, when they've done studies, we know that close to 80% of the meaning doesn't come from the choice of words. It comes from all the other means, whether it's an intonation, whether it's a volume, whether it's punctuation. There's so many other things that carry the real meaning of the conversation, of the information, other than the actual choice of words. And so I think it's critical that, I mean, why pronounced in a way, okay, why versus wow, and why, right there you will carry a completely different thing. But the other element, and you and I spoke before in our conversations, is that the notion of relationship. You have to build a relationship before you can afford to take a certain, not risk, but the license of posing the question. A person who has a relationship with you will likely not have their shoulders go up and tense up when you start using the words why, or when you start structuring the question. And so for me, it has been part of my work. It has been part of my life, whether it was specifically in academic world and education, in coaching, or in the last couple decades, working in a company and basically mentoring people to their path of becoming leaders and designers. So I think the art of, the structure of, the design of the moment is critical, and then the actual delivery of the way you pose the question is also critical.
Again, it's nice to hear your structure of the way that you've done it from both an academic perspective, from a practical perspective. And I guess since we're talking a little bit about creativity, what's exciting for you today in the world of creativity? What's part of Boris's creative joy or juice at the moment?
It's a tough question, because as you and I were talking about the reality of today, the pandemics, it's a completely disastrous situation for the entire world. And yet at the same time, if I set aside for a moment, and I know it's very difficult to do, but if I do set aside for a moment the human suffering and all the strain on the systems, and I think of what has it done to us in a positive way, well, we all had to stop and take an inventory. We had to stop and think. Is our focus in the right place? Is our investment of time, effort, and energy is in the right place? And so I come back to your specific question in terms of creativity. I also had to re-ask myself a question. Well, what do I define as creativity? I've been with a company that is granted this recognition for creativity, Cirque du Soleil, for a little over 27 years. And it's kind of, it becomes a stamp. Oh my God, it's a creative company and you've been part of it and you've been part of creative team. Okay, that's a beautiful general statement, but what does it really mean? And today, to put something in the most simplistic way, stocking up the firewood for the winter, and my wife coming out and looking at it and saying, this is beautiful. You managed to stock it up in such a way that is visually appealing. That is also creative. The choices we make in a certain decisions on how to do this or that, they all have a creative element to it. You know, professionally today, our industry, live entertainment, is in hiatus. I mean, it's not just on ice, it's in it's in terrible place because there is nothing to it. At the same time, it's a phenomenal kick in the butt and an opportunity to look at the fact that it was probably coming, not in the most obvious way, that we needed to start to retake the inventory of, okay, is our form of presenting being the only live, direct contact is the only way? We know that the digital entertainment has been huge, and I'm not referring to e-gaming, although that is also cannot be ignored. But all of those deliveries of different things. And so now there is time on hands. And so I've been part of a couple very small groups that are very much looking forward in posing the question, why? And we posing the question, what are the possibilities? What are the opportunities post-COVID? Does it mean, and in posing this question, we have to ask ourselves, when we say post-COVID, do we feel the confidence that post-COVID means going back to how it used to be, or we may never go back to how it used to be? And so we're looking at our world, we're looking at, okay, there is all of the digital technologies that have been developing. Well, what does it mean? And I'm still holding on to the notion of human connection. You and I are talking right now, and we've decided that we're doing it with video. And that makes a huge difference compared to doing it just on voice. And it makes a huge difference compared to doing it just in a text, if we were just to write to each other. So this notion of a human energy and ability to share that energy, whether it's through a direct eye-to-eye contact or whether it's through combination of different things, it has a value that I don't think will change in the next few hundred years. I think as a species, there is something in us naturally ingrained that we need that proximity or perception of proximity. And so as I was discussing those things with a potential company that you and I spoke about, Dentsu, in Japan, the largest, probably the world's largest marketing agency. And so they started to ask those questions, pose those questions. And one of the thoughts that I was putting forward was that, okay, so we could do live performance somewhere and stream it into the place where, let's say if it's an open space, let's use an example. It's a square and we do a festival, or we do it drive-in theater. And people ask me, well, then why do you need to do it live to another space live? And I said, well, there is something, again, going back to innate feeling in us, that if I'm aware and trust that it is being live, it gives me a different perception compared to recorded, montaged, put together, and then presented. Mm-hmm. And I used reference to when our original founder and owner, Gil Liberté, when he went to space with a Russian spacecraft, as he was flying around the little planet that we are all sharing, they called it a mission poetic mission. And so he's done a lot of different things, but one of the things they did concerts in about 7 or 8 different cities, right, as they were flying over that city. Right. When I spoke to few people that were part of those concerts, one of the things that they shared that was common is that they all felt that it was real and that they were part, mm-hmm, that it was not well filmed, well montaged, and then well broadcasted. It was not broadcasted, it was streamed. Mm-hmm. And so it's this notion of connection. It's one of the things that we're still working on and saying with Dentsu, with any other potential clients and developers, that somehow we have to think of it openly, creatively, as to how do we take the forms that we already know well, but bring it with the use of this phenomenal spur of evolution of the technologies, but yet not make it completely sanitized, completely perfected, and allow a human reality and an air, a human air, or inconsistency, or anything of that nature, because I think that's where we are. And so all of those things, that they are phenomenally in a creative category. Some of it is guessing, and creativity does involve a lot of guessing. There is serendipity. I had to learn, I never heard that word before, and in learning English, I wasn't introduced to that word for the longest time, and I was working with an engineer in Los Angeles, and he kept using the word serendipity, and so I had to look it up. And it was very interesting that when I looked at the definition of the Webster Dictionary in serendipity, and then I was doing presentation, and I was asked to do it in Russian language. It was done in Ukraine, in Kiev. So I needed to look up what is the proper translation, and I found it absolutely bizarre. From what I recall, the definition in Webster Dictionary was serendipity is something that comes in unexpected, as a surprise. It's a gift. And yet in Russian language, the definition of serendipity included that you harvest it, you find it, you influence it. And so it places you in a driver's seat in Russian language, versus in English language, you're at the mercy of.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a huge difference. And so I think when we talk about creativity, and I'm being careful about not mixing creativity and innovation. They're not necessarily the same. They don't have to be the same.
Right.
In the work that I did at Cirque Du Soleil, I have taken a very drastically categorical position, for which I got in trouble a few times. But that's also part.
You got to push the boundaries. That's the way to find it, right?
I don't know where the boundary is until you touch it, right? But I took a categorical position that my department, the group that I was leading and managing, I said, we're responsible to deliver wow level performance. It is absolutely non-negotiable.
Right.
After that, if it's new and different enough, that's a bonus. And if it's genuinely innovative, that's a double bonus. But those are gifts. Those are negotiable. Those are, if we create the correct environment and structure it correctly, business-wise. But the first one is non-negotiable. At the level of that brand that we call Cirque du Soleil, the level of performance that we categorize as wow, non-negotiable. So I think in that sense, creativity in the way you will behave in this process and the way you choose to drive certain things, it's constantly present. Then innovation is something else. It's a product, it's a focus, it's something else.
Well, I've got another word, since you brought in serendipity. I'm going to bring a word in called synchrodestiny. And I'm not sure if you've explored that word before yet. It's a word that I've been exploring with abundance and prosperity in the last about 63 days. And I do believe it's rather serendipitous to have had the opportunity to meet you and Natan, and to explore even this idea of September 25th to October 25th, Culture Days in Canada, coast to coast. And with the serendipitous situation in Canada that there's about 350,000 Canadians who will not have the opportunity to go down to Arizona or Florida or the Caribbean, and that for the first time in 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to be in Canada. And so going back to my simple questions, and also listening to your last question about how, which was a very multi-leveled question, which would have taken someone at your experience and expertise to come up with some answers. I would like to simplify it and simply go, what could be 2 or 3 things that could be explored, experimented with in the next 90 days to allow elderly, people over 55, to explore creativity, curiosity, and allow them to have a connection that may wow them into being willing to relearn, to re-explore, given that they're not going to have that sensory experience in Arizona or Florida. We have an opportunity, perhaps using some technology, yet also perhaps some experiments that could be a lot of fun, could be engaging, and could continue this cultural days that is ending in October and go beyond into the snow days of Canada and perhaps the fun new connection days that are available. So would there be 1 or 2 things that could be done just at the top of your head that could be things to explore?
I think the answers are already in your question. You're already listing the answers in the sense of discovering, helping people to discover small things that are right there, but bringing the focus to it. Whether it's for the first time, rather than going to a store and buying berries, but to go to a local farm and do the picking the berries. Apples, I mean, we're now in this wonderful season. And in the process, well, why not to take a moment and to find some form of guided tours and to look at the color changing of the forests in our parks and all of those things. And why not to start talking about all of the aqua systems that are changing, and in preparing people to the fact that I'm anticipating and I will be watching the way the water will be freezing, and I will be waiting for it to freeze soon enough and thick enough that I can go on the ice. Whether I will be doing snowshoes or whether, all I'm saying is that, you know, in the world of diet, and I'm not talking about weight gain or weight loss in diet, but diet as we eat. We know that eating simpler is better. We also know that eating in season is better. And yet it still is difficult because it's so easy. We can buy whatever we want at almost any given time of the year. And yet just the other day, my wife turned around and said, those blueberries and chocolate, where are they? And they're gone. we ate them. I said, well, we need to go and buy more. And the answer is no. The blueberries from Lake Saint Jean are only done during those 2 weeks, period. You cannot get them at any other time. And this is so bizarre in our sophisticated world, and yet it's so appropriate that we live in a cyclical patterns of the world. And so why not take that opportunity and say, okay, let's look at everything that's so cyclical in where we are. We were too busy to notice, and we were certainly not taken advantage of. So whether the academic institutions develop certain programs and offerings, whether it's trickles down to local communities that will offer something, whether it will be supported by government. But I think as a society at large, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to really enjoy local, but not enjoy it from an economical standpoint only, but also from the cultural, but also from the general well-being. I think that it's all there. And if we present it softly rather than, oh, I want to introduce you to the snowboarding, and so now you need to buy proper goggles, proper gloves, proper jacket. So $500 later, if not more, I'll take you for a couple of rides, and after being bumped around and maybe thrown off, you'll say, that's not for me. Well, then, yeah, perhaps we need to introduce it differently. And yet, I remember the first time I was sitting on one of those machines, and just the sense of the power, it's like, whether it's a motorcycle, a snowmobile, or whatever, it's powerful, it's exciting, it's very, it puts life into you, those new things and stuff. And I think it's endless how many of those things are around us at any given moment.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I've loved having a conversation about questions with you. I've had some great new insights onto the way that you process questions and the way that you engage it. I've got my last little section of today was a little rapid fire, just to allow some people to get to know Boris a little bit better. So you ready? These about 7 or 8 questions. Your favorite book of all time?
Oof.
These are supposed to be rapid fire.
Sunset.
Sunset.
Yes, I'm trying to think of the author. It'll come to me.
Okay.
Yes.
A little easier question then. Your favorite food?
I am all eater. Anything and everything.
Right.
I love delicate, but probably raw fish.
Okay. So raw fish, so sushi. We're gonna have to go one day. That's what I rate top for me. Sashimi, yes. One word to overcome fear.
It's normal.
Most memorable travel spot.
Any place where you have people that are kind and beautiful becomes the most memorable place. It's all about people.
Your number one strength.
Loving people.
Say again?
Loving people.
Your personal motto.
Persistence.
Can you think of an inspiring teacher, your most inspiring teacher? Think of them for a moment, get their picture of their face in your third eye. What were the 3 qualities of your favorite teacher?
I would have to place kindness, expertise, caring.
Thank you, Boris. I think you just shared with us today a little bit about Boris being kind, caring, and inspirational.
Thank you.
And an expert in almost everything that you delve into. So with that, I appreciate you very much, my dear friend. I look forward to having a chat again, and we'll be exploring some questions and maybe some experiments that we can explore: creativity, culture, and reaching out, connecting with people, and having some fun.
I appreciate it very much for you doing that, David, and giving the opportunity to be part of it. Thank you.
Sure.